because he writes her that horrific poem. He writes horrific poetry to her.
Yeah. Yeah. And can we also talk about the fact that she can't read?
And he says to her, oh, so because you couldn't read is why you learned how to hunt? And I'm like, those two things don't have to have a correlation.
No, there's no correlation because her being able to read isn't going to feed her family. Meet Sara and Samantha.
Two cousins obsessed with exploring the vast pop culture landscape, one recommendation at a time.
In each episode, one clueless cousin shares real-time reactions as they navigate the twists and turns of a pop culture topic selected by the other.
From travel to movies,
Little Debbie's to trashy novels.
Get ready to eavesdrop on the candid reactions and dynamic conversations you can only have with family.
This is Foreign and Familiar. Welcome back to Foreign and Familiar. We're so glad that you are eavesdropping on us today. I am Sara.
And I am Samantha. And we have a doozy of an episode.
Oh, we do.
I think it's always a little bit better when the subject material is something we can gleefully jab at. In this case, this is one that I am going to throw into a fire and release all my hard-earned rage. You know, I need a little mid-afternoon sugar rush. I will say one thing interesting as we are talking about this. Little Debbie does not really focus on cookies.
Right. On their website, because I've done extensive Little Debbie research, they do have things grouped by brownies, donuts, cakes, and I think there's a cookie category, but I wouldn't even classify them as cookies. Like the oatmeal cream pies, I don't think those count as cookies.
I mean, that's a tough one. It's kind of like bordering on the line of, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Right.
Which I don't know where you fall on that side of the debate.
You know, I don't know that I have an opinion because I just love hot dogs. Like a good hot dog, I will choose for any meal, any day. So I don't really care that it's whether it's a sandwich or not.
I always say that hot dogs are the key to my pear-shaped figure, right? I mean, I will, yes, hot dog, chili cheese dog is usually where it's at for me. 7-Eleven hot dog's good. I tend to do white onions and yellow mustard if it's not a chili cheese dog. Like it's that for me. Have you had a Chicago dog?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say Chicago style dogs that I've had are like relish onions,
sport peppers,
a
slice of tomato, celery salt, which is, it actually really does make a huge difference. I think
absolutely does.
I think that's the key. It makes me consider doing celery salt, you know, in my cooking, but I haven't. Right. I could honestly, I want a chili cheese dog. If I go down to Portillo's here in Chicago, I want a chili cheese dog. I don't want the, but I get why people want to do Chicago dogs. So I fall on the debate. I go back and forth. I do think a hot dog is a sandwich.
I mean, in the same way that you would want, I would like that as a side with a hot dog. So if like the way that it's served, then yeah, I would think because it's served the same way as a sandwich. And a lot of menus include hot dogs in the sandwich category. So
I think for a sandwich, you need 2 pieces of bread, a meat in the center, and condiments. And so you can't really tell me that a hot dog's not. I think that there could be some debate on, is it 2 pieces of bread? It's a hot dog bun, 2 pieces of bread. Or people would say, you know, it's a hot dog might be more like a sub, like a meatball sub. Because would you call a meatball sub a sandwich? I would. I think that, because what is it if it's not?
Sausage, bratwurst, kielbasa. What do all of those fall into? Are those sandwiches? Because they're basically the same thing.
I love that you just said kielbasa because, you know, that's just such a Pittsburgh thing because everybody else pronounces it kielbasa.
Oh, of course.
I say kielbasa. I mean, we got kielbasa. All that. We got that 412 showing on us. So back to the Little Debbie's. I mean, they do have the chocolate chip cookie sandwiches. We can talk about that.
True.
That can be the one we talk about today. I'm not into those. I think the cookies are too soft. I don't think the flavors are there. I would never even pick those up. I wouldn't eat those. I would walk right past them. I do not feel that way about the oatmeal cream pie. I would say I don't consider them cookies because I think the oatmeal cream pie or the fudge rounds or things like that are close to, in Lancaster, we have whoopie pies, right?
Right.
And I would not call a whoopie pie a cookie. So I would not call, those sandwiches cookies.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. What a pragmatic and logical line here.
Yeah. Look at us go.
Our family listeners, all two of them are thinking, why am I tuning in today? But you are tuning in because we have an insane doozy of an episode today. We are so excited to record and we are going to jump right in. Let's tee it up. Sara, what are we discussing today?
Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about the wildly popular A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. If you're not familiar with this book, it is huge on Book Talk. Everyone has read it. Everyone talks about it. It is very popular in the YA fantasy, adult fantasy, sci-fi genre. Sam, did you know that this book was nominated for an award?
I did not. And
can you believe it?
No, I genuinely cannot believe it.
It was nominated for the best young adult fantasy and sci-fi fiction novel on Goodreads in 2015.
So let's get into a little bit before we get in here. We have a couple questions. What is it? We've talked about it. A Court of Thorn and Roses, the first, and what is a series of 7 or 8 books. We're reading the first one here. My question for you is, why did you recommend it, and or what did you think that I might respond to? Because I am going to respond for the next hour or so.
Oh, I know you are. And I have been waiting for this. So I read a lot as a kid. After college, grad school, reading all of the research and scholarly stuff that they make you read. I just kind of was tired of reading all the time. So I went a good period of time without reading anything for fun. Let me see if I can find something that hits everything that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for something that's fantasy. I do prefer romance. And as I was looking at all of these lists, this book kept coming up. So, and I was thinking about it. I think I bought it and started it when you were here, and I really enjoyed it. If I were to go back and reread it, I don't know that I would enjoy it as much, but it was the book that kind of reignited my love of reading. So it does hold a special place in my heart. And I'm wearing my Court of Thorns and Roses shirt today.
So many things with that.
I don't care.
Number 1, have you never read a book before? And number 2, you have merch.
I do. I have so much merch.
So you're have you read all of them?
I have.
Let's get a little bit into young adult real quick and talk about some of our cultural notes. Kind of, there was this boom, about 10 years ago, started with Twilight. And I will set the stage by saying I read all of the Twilights. I've read all of the Hunger Games. I've read all of the Games of Thrones. I have read the first Divergent. I read all of the Harry Potters growing up. So I think that young adult is something that I have always or have read the books while they were being released. It's not like I've gone back and read through, except for Game of Thrones, because that's been forever.
Right.
So I love a good, I'm team Edward. Of
course.
PETA. I like the Hunger Games. Twilight, it is what it is. I've never done 50 Shades of Grey, though. That to me,
neither have I.
It's a step too far, because that is actually fanfic of Twilight if they were sleeping together. So you said that this is, we joke around and we used to call this book fairy smut, right?
Right. Because it is widely popular for the romance aspects of the book.
It's not even... When you say fairies, I think we're going to talk, I'm thinking Tinkerbell. I'm thinking the people from Fern Gully, the forest fairies, things like that. No, these are some sort of shapeshifters. Yeah. The thing is, I was excited to read this when we were doing this podcast, and we decided this was one we were going to do, because I have a kind of long hidden history with young adult, and I can let's say, form an opinion on the heroine that the guys are fighting over and who she should be with. What surprises me is this says she is the number one, she is a New York Times bestselling author.
Oh, yeah.
Do we know what I'm Googling her net worth. It's just going to make me angry. She has a net worth of $40 million.
Yeah. So Acotar, as it is lovingly called, there are 4 books and 1 novella. I would argue 5, but like, I feel like the novella sets up a lot.
Everybody reading this book is being introduced to the characters for the first time. She has to do some world building, let's say. I think we just jump right in after the break, though. Sounds good.
All right, we are back, ready to dive into this interesting novel. I will say, Sam, this is a very divisive book. There are a lot of people who are diehard fans, and then there are a lot of people who hate it. And I think, rightfully so, there are a lot of problematic things with the writing, with the characters, with the plot, all of that stuff. But let's go ahead and get right into it. Our main character, Feyre, is 19 years old at the beginning of the story. I think that's probably worth mentioning.
Feyre, Feyre. They have to tell you how to pronounce it.
Yeah, there's a pronunciation guide.
Tamlin.
Which, to be fair, Tamlin is a Scottish or an Irish legend. There is a tale of Tamlin that is loosely used as the inspiration for his character. So that one's not entirely made up.
What's Rizbar?
What?
Rizbad? What is his name? Riz, like charisma? No, I'm kidding. No. What's his name?
Rhys?
Is it Rhys?
Yeah, Rhys. Rhysand. It's Rhys.
This is the thing. Their names can be Stephen and Joel and Stephanie. That's my part. Like Rhysand, Tamlin, Feyre. You have to tell me. It's like it does nothing for me. I will say though, the bad lady's name is Amarantha.
Yep.
Which is basically, I guess, how fairies say Samantha. So I was into that part of it. Nesta. It reminds me of it's just kind of the unnecessary stuff where you kind of get a little confused. In the Game of Thrones book, for no reason at all, a group of people call uncles nuncles. Like it's an apostrophe uncle. And like me and my friends will talk about it, we'll be, they just wanted to say nuncle. Like
there's no explanation for it.
It's one group of people are like, oh, nuncle. So that's how I felt with some of the characters in this book. Is it's just like the names were a choice from the beginning. I actually thought her name was Feyre, Feyre, which I would have liked that. So anyway, so you're telling me it's not. I am going to call him Rhysand.
That's okay. It's Rhys.
No, if she wanted me to call him Rhys, she should name him Rhys, Reese. The names were something I had on my list to react to.
Feyre is this 19-year-old. She lives with her father, her sister Nesta, and her sister Elaine. They're like really struggling. And of course, they make Feyre go out and do all of the hunting for them because they're too lazy to do it themselves.
Kirkland signature Katniss Everdeen.
Yeah, that was how we've characterized her.
She's got a bow in the woods, just like Katniss does. The family's in poverty, just like they are in District 12. Feyre is the only the only responsible one. The dad is like written as a joke on purpose, but you know.
Which I guess the difference is that everyone else is fully capable of contributing and they choose not to. But basically, Feyre goes out and she kills a wolf in the wood. And suddenly this giant creature just bursts into the cabin and says that she either needs to die or get locked up like Belle, Beauty and the Beast style for killing this wolf.
As soon as the beast walks in, first of all, I couldn't even follow the descriptions. It's a bear that moves in a feline manner. What is that?
Like, it's like, I don't know. It's like some kind of
I
something.
had to Google drawings of this beast because I couldn't figure out, reading the description, what I was supposed to look at. He pops in and says, "You killed this thing. You can either come with me for the rest of your life or you can die." And immediately, now to go in, I went completely blind into this. I didn't even read the back of the book jacket. I had no idea. I went right into it. My immediate thought is he's kidnapping her to be a sex slave. It just felt like a weird energy.
Mm-hmm. You're not far off, though. So that, like, this starts with the assumption that, like, they can't lie because they're fae. And Feyre also thinks that, like, something about the air and, like, the food is, like, lethal or something there. So she's like, I'm gonna die anyway.
The author puts right in there, fairies can't lie, so they have to tell me the truth. So I guess I gotta go.
Right. It's very much like Beauty and the Beast style for a while. She's
and his name is Tamlin.
His name is Tamlin. Yes, we've established that his name is Tamlin. And typical Beauty and the Beast style, the spring court has been cursed. So they all have these masquerade masks.
His human form, which is supposedly like the most beautiful man that you've ever seen, like a real Beauty and the Beast. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's a ripoff of Beauty and the Beast, except he's got a gold mask on his face that he can't take off from his nose up.
Yeah.
And at his will, claws can come out of his knuckles and fangs can come down off his. So she gets to see parts of him, but he's mostly not transformed into the beast for most of it.
Right.
I think that she wants to leave at the beginning.
Right.
He tells her, you can leave, but then I can't protect you.
Mm-hmm.
And he binds her with magic a couple times when she wants to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So he tells her, there's no way, I've taken care of your family.
Yeah.
But if you leave, I'm not taking care of your family anymore. But then in the same breath says, it's really important to me that you're here, that you're not a slave and you're here of your own volition. And then he's got a friend living with him, Lucian. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Lucian? Yeah.
She knows that there's some sort of curse. She knows they can't take the masks off, but typical curse fashion, none of them can like really give any details about it. She just kind of knows it's there and has to like figure it out on her own.
When I read this, I think I texted you and I said, what it reads like is that there was a big ancient Renaissance. They're all wearing these masks from the eyes up, the erotic mask parties or whatever. It felt like they were trying to say that this was this big Renaissance swingers party. Everybody put their car keys in a wicker basket and we're going to draw. And then like the curse came and stuck the masks to their faces.
Which, like, if you think about it, in Beauty and the Beast, he's stuck as a beast, right? So, like, Belle has to fall in love with his personality, not his appearance. Here we have Tamlin, who is described as being, like, the most beautiful man she's ever seen. He has just a very small part of his face covered. So, like, is that really even a problem? Because she already knows mostly what he looks like.
It certainly does not end up being a problem for her.
No, it's not a problem at all.
And listen, like, I'm mad at her. She's got one option. He's supposedly really beautiful. For the next 100 pages or so, she's just becoming accustomed to life at the manor. She's almost dying from all of these creatures randomly that are coming onto the property. She never learns her lesson. And how many times, again, though, I love a good one or two of those. You go back to Twilight, first book, Bella gets in some trouble. Edward comes out of nowhere and, takes her to dinner and stuff. I think that there is something like that's the romance part of it, right?
Right. Yeah. Is that like,
and he keeps telling her, like, get out, stay in the room, don't do this, don't do that. She does it anyway. And then he comes and saves her anyway. And then he gets really soft with her and is like, why didn't you listen to me? And we kind of go back and forth on that a little bit. And then things start to blossom in the spring court.
Yeah, things do start to blossom. Well, first of all, there's this weird ceremony, and I can't.
Yeah, Calinium or something. I just read it. So I was going to text you, but I'm saving it to the pod. It literally is a group sex party.
Yep. So
which is exactly what I said when I read that. And
it has to do with like restoring magic to the court or something like that.
Once a year. Okay. Once a year, they have this party and Tamlin gets to pick a partner. And depending on how like fulfilling his night with his partner is how healthy the earth is for the next year. So confirmed sex parties. And they tell her, you know, you can't come because you're human. And Tamlin isn't going to know what to do if you come. Like his B-side comes out. You should be scared of, you know, who he is.
Basically, Lucian's like, you can't come because like he's gonna pick you.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can handle it.
Right. Like talk about an ultimate wingman though. I mean, Lucian really puts himself out for Tamlin this entire book. I will say that.
He's a true friend. Like there's a lot of paint in this series, and Tamlin's all like painted up so that you can really see everywhere that somebody else's hands have been.
That's something that goes all throughout. I painted you so I could see if somebody touched you and your paint was moved. It's a weird control thing. Like girls read this stuff, okay? And I understand. I'm not saying, listen, Edward Cullen is very problematic, as are a lot of these other guys. So I'm not saying, but there wasn't this type of stuff, I think, where this is smuttier, and that's okay, but it's definitely smuttier.
It's a choice.
Edward specifically is old fashioned and will not sleep with Bella until they are married.
True.
Which you have this whole, then, the baby and like there's this pro-life slant. It was like that with Divergent too.
Yeah.
Like that never happens, I think, in Divergent, and same with the Hunger Games. So it is interesting to read a little bit more forward. I mean, it's smut. I'm not saying it's bad smut. I'm just saying it's interesting. It's young adult, and it feels like it's just a little bit more mature than the stuff that I was reading when I was a young adult. But
right. Yeah, definitely. So, but at this point, I think is when we're introduced to Rhys for the first time, because Feyre's kind of getting hassled by some other fairies, and
she decides to go anyway after they tell her you're going to screw everything up if you go.
Yeah, and she's like, no, I'm not. So she goes anyway and gets into trouble, and Rhys comes out of nowhere and kind of saves the day a little bit.
And the difference between Rhys is he is a brunette, black-haired, violet-eyed, beautiful man with no mask.
No mask. So
she describes him as the most beautiful man she's ever seen, which I thought was interesting because at this point, her and Tamlin are definitely emotionally entangled, because he writes her that horrific poem. He writes horrific poetry to her.
Yeah. And can we also talk about the fact that she can't read?
And he says to her, oh, so because you couldn't read is why you learned how to hunt? And I'm like, those two things don't have to have a correlation.
No, there's no correlation, because her being able to read isn't going to feed her family.
Correct. And
ever. He
pulls that out. He's like, let me help you try to write. And she's really stubborn, but then he does write poems for her. And I'm sorry, Tamlin, you got to do a little bit better than that. The poems were cringe.
So Rhys kind of gets her out of this situation and again tells her, like, you really shouldn't be here. This is bad. And again, she doesn't really listen. And
Lucian gets her out of there.
And then he says, stay in your room, lock the door. And then she's like, no, I want a snack. Which, to be fair, I would have done the same thing.
Yeah, nobody fed her. All the food was down there. Little Debbie, yes. If you have a solid fudge round down there, if you have, oatmeal cream pie, anything like that, yeah, I want a snack. I want a midnight snack. You guys are all having a party. You're having a bunch of sex down there. I'm just sitting here in the mansion by myself. I think I want some nice, like, food and everything like that.
I'd even take a zebra cake at this point, right? So she goes down for some kind of snack, and of course Tamlin is there, and she basically says, I don't want sloppy seconds.
And he says, okay, except then he pins her against the wall and bites her.
Bites her neck, yeah. Not like a vampire bite, because remember, he's like a wolf, cat, lion.
He bites her and tells her that he wishes it was her.
Basically, yeah.
And she's like,
yeah, that's pretty much it.
Flustered. Okay. Yeah. Before we head into break, I did find one of the poems.
Lovely.
He cleared his throat and read the first poem. There once was a lady most beautiful, spirited, if a little unusual. Her friends were few, but how the men did cue, but to all she gave a refusal. That's what it's a good thing he's pretty. It's a good thing he's pretty.
That's about all he's got going for him.
And that he's the high king or whatever. But anyway, let's kick it to break. We'll come back and we'll get into the next part of the book. Welcome back to the Foreign and Familiar Pod, where we are halfway through talking A Court of Thorns and Roses. We have Feyre, who has been held captive, let's say, by a treaty curse, and Tamlin, her fairy shape-shifting suitor,
that writes poetry.
That writes really abysmal poetry, has bitten her neck to stake his claim, let's say. And, you know, she goes to bed and it truly gets her hot and bothered. I mean, that really kind of kicks off she says she goes very quickly from I don't want to be sloppy seconds to kind of into biting, you know, listen.
Yeah.
I mean, few options, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think from then on out, it's just kind of a lot of stuff about their romance, a lot of little stuff. It's just a lot, like you said, very drawn out. There's not a ton plot wise that happens.
So that's something I think we should say is she's trying to figure out what's going on. She asks questions, something where I think it's just poor writing is, you know, her and Lucian will be out in the gates or whatever. And she'll say, hey, I have a question about this. And he'll go, I can't tell you. And she goes, okay. And then he goes, okay, well, if you have to know, and starts spewing all of these things.
Yeah.
Tamlin sees how she cares for the fairy and it's like, you're human. And, you know, how do you care for people like, you know, where, and like does all that thing. And then the next day she wakes up and all of her surroundings are completely different. And here she comes to find out that he had put a glamour, which was magic, on the entire thing. So her servant actually looks completely different than what she thought it was. It ended up that there were fairies. She could all of a sudden see all the monsters. Like he quit hiding all the stuff from her.
Right.
And for me, I was like, everything's a lie. He has you here. He has you seeing all these things.
Yep.
All these moments that you think you're alone and you're walking in the garden and stuff. No, there are all these monsters that he's concealing from you, but they can see you, you know?
Right.
Everything is a lie.
I think his reasoning was because he didn't want her to be too overwhelmed by everything being very different. I mean, how awful to find out that some moment that you thought you were having to yourself, there were like 7 people around you in the kitchen cooking or like doing laundry or something. Well,
and it's just then she starts to realize as she's there that fairies can lie. So it kind of starts to, it feels like the first half of the book is just a misdirection. And I think that that's what frustrates me about the book medium in general. But lazy writers, in my opinion, do a lot of these tropes. You read 300 pages and then they'll do a big reveal on page 315 that there was one detail in one sentence 200 pages ago that you should have picked up on, and then it can change the entire, like, books sometimes do a bait and switch.
Yeah.
And again, not that I think it's here, but I'm starting to think, I'm like, okay, well, you find out they can lie. Now she's here. He broke her down. He tells her, I'm going to take care of your family, but if you leave, I'm not going to take care of them anymore. Mm-hmm. He's winning her over. He's doing all that. She's got an audience. She's being spied on. She doesn't. It gets really hard to root for him in any way, shape, and form. Mm-hmm. And it only gets harder to root for him. But yes, I mean, to your point, things start deteriorating. And then Rhys is how I'm supposed to pronounce the name?
It's Rhys, yeah.
And then Rhys comes in.
So they try to hide her so that he doesn't know that she's there, but they forgot to clear up her dinner plate. And he was like, oh, who's the third person? Like, freaks out, unglamours her. And he can do mind stuff, so he torments her. And I think she, like, throws up afterwards or something like that and is, like, really shaken up. And Tamlin's really traumatized and then is like...
He makes Tamlin the Lord of the High Court.
Yes! I forgot.
Get on his stomach and hands and knees and stomach to bow to him and say that he won't tell Amarantha about her. He makes Tamlin just grovel.
Yes.
Just grovel to protect her.
Oh, yes. Which he does. And then he's like, you know what? I'm going to send you away. This is too dangerous for you to be here. Blah, blah, blah.
And they finally hook up.
Yeah.
250 pages in.
Yeah, a lot of angst and teasing up to that point. But then he sends her away. He sends her back home.
And he sends her away the next day. And he tells her, I love you. And she is rightfully confused. I mean, let's think about it. Rightfully confused. You've kidnapped me. You have basically gaslit me the entire time that I am here.
Everything's a lie.
I've never seen your eyes. I mean, let's talk about them hooking up while he's still wearing that mask. And, I mean, that's, and so she can't say back to him, I love you, even though she feels that way. Because what are we even doing here? You know what I mean? That she has been in complete emotional disarray from the whole thing. So she ends up going back to her house, and yes, she's well taken care of.
But she doesn't want to be there. She wants to go back. And when Feyre arrives back in the spring court, like, everybody's gone except Alice, the maid, I think, is the only one still there. And now, like, Feyre kind of finds out everything about the curse that they've all...
People can't see my face.
Yeah.
People can't see my face. So can I explain to you my thoughts on the curse?
Go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
So the curse is that Amarantha, which again, love the name.
She's the villain. Yeah.
Love she's the villain. Love that she's the strong, Amarantha had a sister, and the sister fell in love with a human. Amarantha was worried about the sister, said the human's going to betray you. He does end up betraying her, killing her. Amarantha misses her sister, so now she hates humans. So, there's a war between the fairies and the humans, and she ends up on the losing side of that. Meanwhile, and I'm like, that's great. Like, what a great motive. Well, she falls in love with Tamlin, and she wants Tamlin to be her lover. So, okay, now it goes from being this, like, villainous, blah, 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 awesome, to just being like a jilted lover. Right? I mean, that's where we're going.
That's basically it.
Everybody wants Tamlin. Tamlin's the best.
Which we can get into this later. She's a jilted lover that has no problem being with somebody else at the time.
I mean, you don't have stuff that fills your time, right? I mean...
Yeah. I mean, torturing all of fairy isn't enough, I guess.
Listen, she needs her needs met. She's got her needs met. If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with, right?
Yeah, I guess.
So, like a modern woman, let's say. I don't know. I'm not saying I agree. I'm just saying, right. I understand. So,
yeah.
So because Tamlin says, no thanks, hard pass, she tells Tamlin that she will be cursed. She has this big party. She glues the masks to their face. And she says he has 49 years to send one of his own out into the human land, have a girl with hatred for fairies in her heart kill one of the fairies, and then have her fall in love with him and then tell him, I love you, to break the curse.
Yep.
Quite frankly, that's really very, I think, ham-fisted and like right on the nose of everything that's happening. So you go and you look at all this. All the idea of the treaty is a lie, that he had to get her. He came and kidnapped her, which we knew, but they were saying there's no way around it. She thinks fairies can't lie. He's like, there's no way around it, blah, blah, blah. So he forces, I mean, it's a complete lie. And then the whole thing is she has to tell him that she loves him. So how can you trust anything that has happened between them to this moment? Truly. Because if she says, I love you, he gets all his powers back, everything gets healed. So to me, this whole thing is crap. He's got a very significant ulterior motive the entire time.
Yeah, absolutely.
The entire time. I would say up until this point in the book, I was like, I don't know, I'll probably eventually get around to reading the rest of them, or they have this or they have that. It just, and then Alice, who's been like a really good like confidant to her, you were too blind to see his curse. It's all your fault. If you would have just told him that you loved him, it'd be over now.
Everyone blames her.
I mean, it's insanity. It's insanity. And then the character goes through, well, he must have really loved me because he sent me away to be safe. What are you talking about? The mental gymnastics that she is the one that needs to be ashamed, because if I only would have told him I loved him, everything would be fine now. And there's no, you lied to me. Everything is an ulterior motive.
Right.
That really, for me, was the, I can't.
At this point, it feels like the plot was just trying to catch up with all of the world building that had been done. She killed a wolf. How do I make that tie into the curse? Okay, I guess that'll be the one specific thing that she has to do.
I mean, it could be that the treaty is still there, but if she fell in love, like it could be all of that.
Right.
It could be all that she needs to, it just feels like it comes out that he completely lied to her when he came and got her. Yeah. There was no treaty and she thinks he can't lie.
Right, right.
So there is no treaty. There is no, she could have left at any time. He did. He kidnapped her because she was the one, because she killed the first fairy. She's the one that could fill the prophecy. So he took her there so that she would fall in love with him and break the curse. That's what it is. And it's so romanticized. Like, it's romanticized that he fell in love with her too. I understand I'm not a 19-year-old living in fairylands, and I, don't, but there's a reason why it's young adult, and there's a reason why they're 19, because, it's like, how could you trust anyone?
Yeah, she is 19. He's like, what, like 500?
Something like that.
So he's been around a while.
I will say one thing I did like about this that I think Twilight's heavy on, that drives me nuts with this, is he doesn't spend too much time saying he's a horrible monster and you should stay away from him. Like, he kind of owns who he is.
Yeah.
Edward does that in Twilight for like 4 books, and she has to keep convincing him she loves him and stuff. And listen, I'm not saying that those other books are perfect and the thing of young adult, but I just felt like, okay, you've done this twice now. You've put glamours on things twice now. He's a liar. And now it was 2 days or 3 days before the end of the curse, and he decided to send her away and not make her say, I love you. And then everybody blames her.
Right.
About not being open-hearted enough to tell him that it's wild. It's truly wild.
And it keeps getting wilder because now she is going to try to rescue him and everybody else in the spring court. So she goes to Amarantha's court and is captured, obviously.
Because that's all she does is get captured.
Right. She's in places that she shouldn't be, and she gets kidnapped or captured somehow. So we'll get into some of the more problematic things about Amarantha's court after a break. Getting back into the last chunk of the book, I said early on this book is pretty divisive, and I think we now get into the I mean, obviously there have been flaws throughout the entire book, but I feel like this last chunk is where people really have strong opinions. So Feyre knows that she is to blame for everything that's happened. Everyone's made that very clear to her. She went into
the way that they talk to her. They're like, you're such an insignificant, incapable, illiterate human. I mean, literally for like 40 pages.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
Not that long.
Yeah, it feels like it's a while. So she's in Amarantha's court. Of course, she's somewhere else that she's not supposed to be when everyone told her, don't go there. She gets kidnapped or captured or whatever. And Amarantha, you know, in all her villainous glory, decides that she can have some fun. So she gives her 3 challenges. She can solve a riddle or go through 3 challenges to save Tamlin and everybody else. So she goes through the challenges. The first one, she has to like fight this giant worm thingy in this like bone pit, which she's a hunter, so of course she is able to do it, not without getting very injured in the process.
She's got a broken arm after the worm.
Not just broken, it's like a protruding bone. Like she's moments away from death.
So she thinks Lucian's going to come help her because he's been like a really good friend to Tamlin the whole time. But Lucian doesn't come. Rhysand comes. Rhys comes.
He does. And he tries to make a bargain with her, tries to heal her. So he tries first. And then what I don't like, he like grabs her broken arm and like twists it so that she's in so much pain. She basically agrees to whatever he was going to offer her.
So he says, I will heal your arm if you promise to come to the night court with me for 2 weeks every month. Like a timeshare.
Yeah.
That's the thing with a lot of these young adult books. Okay. Like she's proper, like it's a timeshare. Like, hey, he's like, I know you put out for fairies, you know, like I know, like you and Tamlin have been together. And he's like
a shared custody.
Yeah, he's like, I've seen your mind. Like, I know the things that you and Tamlin do. I'm like interested, basically. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And she says no. She spits at him. Like, listen, she's non-consenting. Okay, she's not consenting. Right. And so she bargains it down to 5 days a month that she agrees to go to the night court with Tamlin 5 days a month for the rest of her life.
And so she has this like tattoo on her forearm that.
Yeah. So when they agree, he doesn't tell her, he marks her all the way up to the elbow or whatever. And he says to her, man, I am so excited because Tamlin's going to freak out.
Yeah. He's like, Tamlin is going to be so mad when he sees this. This is fantastic. So then I think it's here that there's like a big party every night. He really wants to get on Tamlin's nerves. So he puts these like really skimpy dresses on Feyre that I think they're see-through if I'm remembering the description the right way, and paints her up so that he can see if anybody touches her.
And he says that, I'm painting you because I want to see if there are any handprints on you.
And he drugs her and makes her dance.
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody. Every day.
Night after night after night. And she wakes up the next day and she's looking to see where the paint is missing to see if she's been violated. Mm-hmm. And she goes into a depression.
I mean, wouldn't you?
Rightfully so. This drug, this fairy wine, she can't exactly remember. And they're telling her like, man, you're grinding up on all these people. They're making it rain for her. She's doing, you know, all this stuff. And she just talks about how she gets in this like really deep depression and Tamlin has to watch it every single time.
Yep.
So to me, I have it all caps here. He owns her. I mean, he owns her. It's like Princess Leia being in that gold bikini with Jabba the Hutt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
So it's terrible. It's terrible and it's really aggravating. And then he comes to the lair every night and like makes fun. He just makes it very, very hard for her.
So, well, just like, let's not stay here any longer than we need to. So the other two challenges, one, there are like these spikes coming down from the ceiling and she has to pick the right lever to stop them from killing her and Lucian, who's been thrown into this one as well. But remember, she can't read the levers. So Rhys uses his mind, talks to her from his mind to tell her which lever to pick. Rhys goes to visit her one more time and he explains
the reason that he paints her is because when they get out of this, he wants Tamlin to know that he never touched her in any way that he wasn't supposed to.
Right, right.
It doesn't explain the drugging, dancing, and scandalous. Basically, Rhys says, I really care about you. And so that's why I drugged you, dressed you terribly, made you dance in front of the man you really loved the entire night, and forced myself on you to protect you so that the queen didn't know that you were really into him. So I mean, the way that the author, it's just, again, for me, it's just young girls, you know, both of this. You have the first guy that is lying nonstop and there's everything there and has an ulterior motive for everything else. And you have this other guy that's completely degrading her and trying to say, I feel like I have to degrade you just to keep up appearances, but I really like you in quiet.
Yeah.
And I just, that's just a little bit hard for me.
Right. I agree. It's not good for young, impressionable girls who are trying to figure out what makes a good guy. These are not good role models.
If guys are mean to you, but they're beautiful, you know, but they're beautiful, you know?
It's fine if they drug me because they're trying to protect me.
That I was just kind of uncomfortable. I was reading that. I'm like, okay. And listen, all of these books are problematic in all these different ways. They're not supposed to be that deep. I get all that. But I really thought that Rhys was the villain. And I have read a little bit ahead. I know you're going to talk about it. It is mind-blowing to me the way that the rest of the series goes based off this initial book.
Is insane.
And we will get to that, but let's just knock out this last one. She, just real quick, she makes her kill 3 fairies, and Tamlin's the 3rd fairy. And she's like, you have to kill him if you want to live. All of a sudden, her human mind starts working. She realizes that Tamlin has a heart of stone. And so she stabs him in the heart, kills him. So she passes the test.
Right. Order.
Amarantha says, you finished all 3, but I never said I'd release you right away. I only said I'd release you right away if you figured out my riddle.
She figures out the riddle. The curse is broken. Tamlin gets all his powers back. And now he's also extra angry because of all the stuff that Rhys did. He channels all that anger to kill Amarantha. He needs to be pushed to do that. He like pins her up against the wall and somebody's like, hey, yo, here's a sword to kill her with. That wasn't his first thought.
He then, though, goes for extra credit and rips out her throat with his teeth.
Yes, yes. And I guess before that, which we forgot to mention, is that Amarantha tortured Feyre.
Meanwhile, Rhys and all the other fairy lords that are now free decide to make Feyre a fairy and give her immortality. Again, no consent. There, nothing going on.
Nope. Because she was dying. That was their way of saving her. So
I understand that, but
I'm just explaining for the listeners because it wasn't. It's not like it's random.
I mean, yes, the option was that she was going to bleed out and die, or she could be a fairy and live immortally. And these men, love interests make the decision for her. Like, I was tired for Feyre at this point, you know?
Yeah.
Because immortality, you never die. You're signing her up to watch everyone she cares about die. Oh, and the masks fall off.
Yep. So now she can finally see that he is as beautiful as she thought he was.
The 2 inches of her face that she couldn't see.
Right. Because that makes all the difference.
So they go back. They hook up again.
Of course.
And they're going to live happily ever after-ish, except she is going to have to go spend 5 days a month with Rhys, like a period, like Rhys is her period, right?
Yeah.
an unexpected, unwanted visitor every month for 5 days. You don't know how you're going to feel, what's going to happen. And that's where we leave the first book.
That's it.
You can tell Rhys, before he leaves, has a weird,
They have a weird interaction where he's leaving.
And he always has a comment. He's always low-key slut-shaming her, right? He's always like, oh, I could tell that you were really busy. Or he's, I'd want to do this or blah, blah, blah. I can tell you're with. And it's like, bro. Also, he's not, Tamlin's like a lion beast thing. He's a bat.
He is a bat.
Like, gross.
He's an Allarian, to be precise. He has bat wings. He doesn't transform fully into a bat. He just has bat wings.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. I mean, Rhys, who she does end up with. I mean, like, it's so weird to me to read a book and have that be, that would be like if Bella ended up with Jacob, which, I mean, I guess that happens, but it's just, or Katniss ends up with Gale. It's just, you put in all this effort. She goes through all this stuff for Tamlin. Mm-hmm. And then the things that Rhys did to her in this book are so horrific.
Yeah.
Horrific.
Yeah. He explains in book 2 that the reason he drugged her is because he didn't want her to remember the horrific things she had to go through. But I would argue he's drugging her at the wrong times. I mean, the drugging is an issue to begin with. I mean, what about all the time that she's just lying in a dark cell by herself thinking about all of the horrible things that are going on?
He chooses to take her to that. He says that. See, that's like me. You can hear the anger. He chooses to take her to that. He chooses to dress her like that. He sits there and tells her, I want to upset Tamlin. I don't know why he couldn't, because he eventually lets her in on the first book and says, I'm doing this to protect you. Why can't he do that? Why can't he tell her that? It's the emotional manipulation,
Yeah, for sure.
I know it's not that deep. I know people don't read it for healthy dynamics. I understand he's a monster and I get all that. It just felt a little weird.
Yep, I agree. Anyway, I have some 1-star reviews before we close out.
Yeah.
So let's see if you agree with any of these.
Please.
I'm a second away from dousing myself in gasoline and lighting myself on fire just so I never have to look at this book again.
Fair.
Feyre. If you like this book, good for you. But OMG, I hated it so much. A court of dumb heroine and her horny love interests. I thought that was a good title.
That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
Last one is just no.
I love it.
Just no.
I love it. So, I did do a little bit of research, and it does seem like this has been commissioned for a Hulu series.
The director is the same that did Outlander. They're going to put in all the details.
All the smut stuff.
All the smut.
I think I'm going to skip that one.
Right.
Yeah.
So compare it to a Little Debbie snack cake. Where does it? Can you even disgrace Little Debbie enough?
I mean,
Is it a raisin pie?
I haven't had a raisin pie. That'll be a new one.
I haven't either. Yeah.
I think if I'm trying to compare that to a Little Debbie snack cake that I can just eat and not have any thoughts about, it might be a zebra cake. It might be a solid zebra cake. It just might be. I don't judge people if they pick zebra cakes. I understand the appeal. I'd rather do some other things.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I would say it's fair zebra cake territory. Well, I think that wraps up that roller coaster ride for today.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back to you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for eavesdropping on us.
If you can't get enough of the Cousin Chronicles, head over to Instagram and follow @FauxFamPod for more in-depth info and behind-the-scenes details.
Or email us at foreignfamiliarpod@gmail.com.
Foreign and Familiar is a Flynn & Flynn production.
The theme is Colorful by Allerlie von Nicolai.